Well, welcome to everyone who is joining our True Leadership Roundtable today. We're very excited because we're going to be talking about trust. And so we're delighted for all of you who are listening live, as well as anyone who may be listening to the recording later. I'm Peg Rowe, and I'm one of the global leaders for Primera International, and I'll be moderating today, and I'm going to be joined by three really fantastic panelists who I'll introduce in a moment. I just want to set the stage for our conversation today. It's about trust, and we see trust as one of those really essential ingredients for influential leaders. It's important to both establish yourself as someone who is trustworthy, and then also to convey to those you work with that you trust and empower them. So we know that this is a rich conversation, and today we're going to be talking a bit about how do you let go and trust others? Where do you, sort of fall in the idea of the trust continuum and how you think about trust? How important is it that we trust ourselves? Where does that come into play as we're really exploring this conversation around trust? So I want to introduce our panelists. We have three really interesting, versatile women who are joining us who bring a lot of different kind of experience, and you're going to hear sort of the richness of their experience as they delve into being leaders and having a role in creating trust and being a leader who can be trusted by followers. So I'm going to start with Sara Hassan. And Sara, if you'll just wave and let everybody know you're here. There we go. Thank you. Sara is she's a people resources business partner at Enova International. But the thing I want to mention about Sara is that before joining Enova, which she did just recently, she worked in a consultancy where she had the opportunity to engage with lots of different leaders in lots of different companies. And I think that's really given her a perspective, not just from where she sits today, but from other companies where she's had that opportunity to observe how trust exists or doesn't, sort of the ebb and the flow of it in other companies. So we're delighted to have Sara and both her current experience and her past experience that she brings to this conversation today. So welcome, Sara, and thanks for being on the panel. And then I want to introduce Erin Inman. And Erin, hello, there we go. Erin is the president and CEO of Primera Engineers. And the thing about Erin is that in addition to being experienced as an electrical engineer and having years of experience and working in lots of different arenas with electrical engineering, she has worked at Primera for close to 2 decades now. The last 3 of which she purchased the company and has become the CEO and the owner of it. So she has a lot of really interesting perspective on being, in a company for that long, and what she's observed about trust and how trust changes, as you change in your role and your position within the company. So welcome, Erin, and thank you so much for joining us. I know you're going to bring some great examples to the work that we're doing. And then lastly, I want to introduce Gabrielle Kalkwijk, who is joining us from the Netherlands. And Gabrielle, if you want to say hello, thank you. Gabriella has spent, many years, a couple of decades worth of experience in various parts of the food industry, having joined Dawn Foods, where she's currently the president, and it's a long list of things that she's president of. She's got global operations and is responsible for Europe and Africa, Middle East, and the Asian Pacific. So lots of responsibility that is really global and worldwide. She joined as a vice president of operations and then has risen to the role of president just this last year. And I think really until this week has been wearing both hats. Is that correct? Yes, she's been doing both. So she just has hired her replacement, and that's going to be a welcome addition to her team so that she can now focus on doing a job as opposed to doing 2 jobs, which is terrific. So as you can tell, and then lastly, behind the scenes, I want to mention that Betsy Sobiak, who is also one of our global leaders at Tierra, is producing this program for us, and she'll be manning the board. And if you have questions that you want to pose on the chat box, Betsy will field those and send them to me, and we'll introduce those to the panelists as they come in. So please feel free to engage in any way you like. So one of the things that you can tell is that we have a panel that is representative of lots of different industries as well as obviously lots of different experience. So I want to start off with just this first idea around how essential is trust. And when I'm in prepping for this call and talking with each of our three panelists, when I asked the question, is trust essential? There was an emphatic, almost before I could finish the sentence, yes, it's essential. There's no debate about that. We all agree. We're all aligned around how essential trust is. But let's talk a little bit about some of those perspectives. So Sara, I'm going to start with you. If you want to pop off of mute. And I would love just to hear, what are your perspectives? How do you see trust showing up in organizations? And where, how does this essential ingredient, as we're calling it, really begin to affect and impact an organization?
Yeah, trust, I see it as a way to connect with employees, and studies show it increases productivity, increases morale, and it allows for innovation in employees as well. Something that I'm experiencing today is working on building trust with my new organization that I'm at, working with the executives and helping them understand that I'm here to support them and I'm not here to judge. And I find it, there's a wide variety of different ways that I try to produce trust and create trust with them. And one of the ways is showing vulnerability as well. And so I'm super passionate about it. And I really want studies show also that there's, whenever trust isn't present, then there's also people's morales go down. And so it's absolutely necessary to be able to have that trust that's present.
Great, thank you. So I think that's something that feels like it was true for everyone. Everyone had that kind of a perspective about trust. But Erin, I'm going to ask if you would share a really interesting observation about the importance of creating trust, particularly in a professional services organization. So if you want to pop off mute, I'd love for you to share sort of that view that you have, what your experience is.
We're a professional services organization, so what we sell is our talent, and our talent can walk out the door anytime. And if they don't have a strong feeling of trust, they're going to be looking for something else. So we firmly believe that trust is what binds people to the organization. Mm-hmm. And we do a lot of project work. So there's teams that are working together, and they have to trust that everybody's going to do their part. And so building up that trust, not only between people in the organization, but within teams in the organization, is essential.
Right. And I actually was a leader in a professional services organization as well at one point. And there was a shortage of the talent that we had. And we knew that our talent was getting calls from recruiters virtually every night. Like at any moment, they could make a decision to leave. So when you said that, I was like, that's so resonant that, it's not just about creating productivity and empowering people and having good work, but it's also a function of how much your team and your staff and your employees feel connected to the organization and really want to stay as a result of that. So I appreciate you bringing that to the conversation because I think it's so important. So, Gabrielle, when we were talking, I said at one point, so is this idea of trust outdated? And again, that was an emphatic, no, absolutely not. It's not outdated. And in fact, you mentioned that you had recently been to a really interesting conference that you called Leadership 4.0. And you mentioned some things around trust and its connection to empowerment that I wondered if you would be willing to share with us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Peg. I was invited to share my experiences around Leadership 4.0. This is around how to be a leader in the digital world. And we all know what's all going on, how technology is evolving, the complexity of that. And what was so interesting about that is around all discussions around digital, the relevance of data, it was really around leadership and how do you manage that? And the answer was very clear. This is all about co-creation. This is around how do you empower the teams. In the current role as a leader, you cannot know anything anymore. So the only way to survive is if you empower your teams, if you make sure that you trust them in terms of their capabilities and their competences, so that they can do their work and brief you back in case of any escalation, in case of any urgency in terms of progress. Because what they said, and I like the statement so much, Superman is dead.
Yes.
You know, Superman doesn't exist anymore, even not to speak about Superwomen. You know, that's not attainable concept at all. So I really loved how they did that, because then you talk about trust. And for me, we didn't discuss that yet, but for me, you have two different ways looking on it. You have trust in the sense of, I trust you, you are my friend. I don't talk about that in business society. Because typically, if you would appoint people based on relationship in certain positions, you may trouble performance or a development need, because you risk that you appoint somebody who is not in line with the performance or the competent needs of the company. I talk really, if I talk about trust, around do we sure that create a safe environment for a team to perform? And this is the base in the famous book of Patrick Lencioni around team effectiveness. I love that one. I see everybody nodding. I love that too.
Yes.
But this is all around connection, you know, and if you want really to perform better as a team, you need to know each other's talents, you need to know each other's strengths, and you need a connection for that. So you need to talk to each other and have the respect to be open in that conversations, rather than that the trust is coming from the friendship. It's the trust because you create an environment in which you can speak out and listen to each other. And that's asking from you as a leader something as well. You said already something about vulnerability, Sarah. If you talk about strengths, if you talk about drivers, values, you know, do you dare to show your own talents and strength, but also your weaknesses as well? So this is for me, trust, then it leads to a connection. And I'm very passionate about it, that I believe that we need more connection in business society to come to meaningful leadership.
Great, thanks. And I was really fascinated by this, you know, by the conference that you went to, because I think it really does emphasize that first plank of Lencioni's book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The very first plank is trust. Without trust, none of the rest of it can happen effectively. So, you know, this idea that we're building off of a foundation of trust, I think, becomes pretty essential. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of the trust continuum. So one of the things that we know is that most of us are sort of hardwired around how we relate to trust. So we often come to trust to relationships with the perspective of, I'm going to trust you until you do something to lose my trust, or you must earn my trust. And neither perspective is right or wrong. It's just understanding that each of us may have a different point of view or a different perspective in terms of where we approach trust. So if we take that as a sort of a beginning point, and then we think of the trust continuum as going from, on one side, no trust, doesn't exist, to the other side, absolute trust. There's a whole lot of room in between for where we might land as it relates to trust. So I'd like for us just to spend a couple of minutes talking about, what do we see there? How does that relate for you? And what do you observe about yourself on this trust continuum? And Sarah, I'm going to start with you again. If you would just, you know, share sort of, as you listen to that, as you hear that, where do you find yourself? Where would you locate yourself on that continuum?
Yeah, it's so funny because I know whenever we were prepping for this, I was like, oh yeah, I totally give trust to people immediately. Yes. And then I started talking a little bit more and I'm like, well, actually, I kind of don't. Like, I think I fall right in the middle, right? Of being able to always try to assume positive intent from people and then work from there. And I think over time, I start, you know, developing trust with each other. There are some people that I immediately feel a connection with, and I, you know, test the waters a little bit, whether that's, you know, showing or sharing some observations that are very personal, but I am definitely in the middle of that continuum for sure.
Great, thanks. And Erin, how about you? Where do you see yourself on that continuum?
I would agree, I'm probably more trusting, but I think when you meet somebody, probably in the first 5 or 10 minutes of conversation, you get a feel for them if they come off as high integrity, as, you know, and you make a connection with them. It's easier to push further on the trust continuum, as opposed to, you know, somebody that you're talking to that maybe comes off as kind of salesy, or, you know, I don't want to say schmarmy, but, you know, you kind of get that feel like, ooh, then it's more, you have to earn my trust.
Yeah.
So I think it's really dependent on the person.
Yeah, so my word for that is icky. They're a little icky. They're just a little icky, not quite what I was hoping for. Yeah, so the thing I love is that both of you have touched on, as Gabriella did as well, this idea that there's almost like an intuitive sense we have. There's like an intuitive hit. There's an instinct that kind of comes into play here. And when Gabrielle and I were talking, one of the things that we talked about was, it's interesting because on this idea of trust, that instinct doesn't have us flash like bright lights and say trust, don't trust. It's just like this sense that you get. And one of the things we talked about was it's an innate sense. Sometimes people just ignore it. They don't actually pay attention to it. But we love that. We have these great examples that both of us had experienced in the animal world, like dogs and horses in particular. They either get your energy and they're attracted to it and they'll come to you without prompting, or they just turn tail and head away. And so, I love that example because I do think that not just for humans, but for lots of other parts of the kingdom, if you will, there is this sense that we just get about people, like, yeah, they're a good person or they're not. And I know for Gabrielle, I'm going to ask you if you would talk a little bit about that, because one of the things that I know you do as a leader is that you really want to foster this idea of how do people connect and get to know each other, have an opportunity to be a little bit vulnerable, not just, sort of sit in meetings and share ideas, but how do you create those experiences that bond the team? So I'd love for you to share a few of the things that you've done with your teams over the course of your career that have really helped to foster that really strong foundation of trust.
Yeah, so to start with, if you would look at Wikipedia on the definition of a team, together each one achieves more, then the definition is really all about a coordinated effort in which you use each other's strengths. So if you want to be effective as a team, the first starting point is, do you know each other's strengths? Do you know each other's weaknesses? And do we dare to speak about it? And of course, in the end, it starts about, do you know it about yourself? So this is all around awareness. This is all around your own journey, your personal development as a leader. And that was, of course, also my way. So I learned horseback riding when my daughter started riding, which was 8-9 years ago. And, for those who are in horse riding, you can't ride horse with your mind. And typically in the jobs we have, this is also a lot driven by the mind, where I also have a very strong intuition. So it has always been my journey to combine these two and make sure the mind doesn't take over. Well, I can tell you, you can't horse ride with your head. Yeah, so that has been my journey. But after that, the last 2-3 years, I did some horse coaching. So I did courses for horse coaching. And you were asking about the journey with my team. So back now to the definition of Wikipedia, I always try, if we do team sessions, to do something personal. And I see people always think like, oh, with Gabrielle, we always have to do something personal. But in the end, they love it. And why is that? Because you connect with each other, you start to know each other, you start to know about who is good in what, how can we use that better? Well, maybe I call if I have a question. And so this is really around teams on how to make sure that we start to understand these talents, how is the room for connection. And for example, when I had the first event with my new team in the US, we did a small exercise about DISC. We had a small picnic outside in the main building. It didn't cost that much. So I think that's the fun too. How can we do something creative, a little bit different than all the standard? That's the past. So we did some exercises around DISC, which was insightful, which gives an opportunity for a meaningful conversation. And with my European team, and you were referring to that, we have done twice team buildings with horses, and really the feedback of the horse in, how to meet the horse and then to see the reaction of the horse to your leadership style. And that is really insightful. You don't need a coach for that. The horse will tell you. So, I really believe that this way we can give some tools and some feedback to people in a different way, to start thinking in a different way, to go out of the comfort zone, to have their own journey. And then it's up to the team members to develop themselves. But It can be very insightful and much fun at the same time. And Peg, that's back to you. Tiara, having exactly the same purpose, meaningful questions and fun at the same time. And that's why I love you so much and why I support Tiara so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I'd love to turn it again back to Sara and Erin from the standpoint of both of you have experiences within organizations. You know, what are the ways that you have either observed or for yourself found that it is helpful in building this foundation of trust within a team? And either of you, whoever would like to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. For me, I think recognition is something that is a really great way to start building trust, whether that's in a public setting or individually. Showing some kind of recognition is an awesome way to be able to show that and to also build trust within others. I think something else is also being confident in their skills, allowing them to run with things and not being, hover over them and do this micromanagey thing, giving them the space to be able to almost craft their own project and hone in on their skills a little bit more and let them run with it. Of course, always being there if they need the support, but letting them run free and going from there. I also think that the encouragement piece is also really important in developing trust with others, wanting to show them that I'm supportive and they're capable of doing it. And I'm also very interested in doing the whole mind-body connection and like really thinking of people as a whole person and coming in from that perspective as well. So that's just a couple of ways that I look at building trust with others.
Great. And Erin, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Sara said. In a project-based firm, we push, especially some of our younger engineers, to take on a little bit more, but, they know that we have their back and that, it's okay if you make a mistake. We're not gonna, throw you under the bus if you mess something up. We're here behind you to, make sure it doesn't get to the point that it's catastrophic, but you can make little mistakes and that's how you learn, and that we're here to back them up. But I think also challenging people and helping show them their path to growth helps them build trust that you're there looking out for their best interests. We're a very culture-based firm, so we love Patrick Lencioni. We've, as a team, read all of his books and really embraced that. And have created an organization that's open and honest. So we have open discussions and, people can disagree without, having a fight and walking out of the room. So I think all of those things together help build trust that we're all working for the same goal.
Yeah, so one of the things that I appreciate that both of you have touched on without really calling it out is that as you're developing teams, particularly when your teams have, younger team members who are, getting, sort of indoctrinated to the culture of the organization, figuring it out, that there are ways of helping to support them in creating trust along the way and developing their relationship with the organization from a trusting perspective, knowing that it's okay to make a mistake and to be able to bring a new idea forward and to be encouraged to do that so that you have ways of encouraging that vulnerability. Erin, I'm going to ask you a question because one of the things that was so interesting in our conversation is that you had worked at Primera for 15 plus years at the time that you bought the company. So you already had been running over half the company. You certainly had established a lot of high trust relationships within your team as well as the rest of the company. And yet when you purchased the company and you became the CEO, it was interesting because you noticed some changes just in the way people related from a trust standpoint. So first, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that. And then I would also love for you to talk about the cultural change that you introduced, which in fact tinkered with trust. So if you would talk about both those things, that would be, I think, really enlightening for all of us. Okay, we're not hearing Erin. And she's not on mute. Betsy, do you have anything you can do to help here? Any ideas?
Hi, Erin. Sometimes your sound might have gone off on your computer, the volume button or something like that. Has anything changed there? And maybe we go to another question while Erin is monkeying with some of her slides.
Is figuring out some of that. I'm gonna unmute me. So one of the questions that has come up from the chat room is, do we observe differences in trust between men and women? Are there gender differences in how men approach trust and how women approach trust? So Sarah, I'm going to ask if you would take a first crack at that, and then Gabrielle, and then we'll come back to Erin to see if we've got sound again.
Yeah, I think there are general differences in gender and when it comes to trust. I think especially when it comes to communication in general, but for me, I feel as if I approach it in the same way. And I personally don't do anything different based on gender.
Right.
But I think it's important just to have that transparency with each other.
Summarize, say
Uh-oh, I'm getting a little bit of breakout.
Hold tight, everybody. Let's see if we can fix this technical challenge in just 1 second. Erin, does your sound work again? Can we see about you?
Nope.
We can hear you, but it's very, very low. So there's something going on with the volume setting on yours that if you click on the bottom left, there's a little arrow by your microphone, and you can sometimes up-level the volume there. And then Peg, now you're back. So you just popped off for a second for some reason.
My internet was unstable. Yes, I got a sign. Your internet's unstable, and then I disappeared.
I feel like we should have those signs like in bubbles over our head through the day whenever we're
I know.
I think
It's so funny.
we're all good.
So funny.
So.
Okay, Erin, do we have you on sound again yet?
Am I there?
Yes, but very, very low. So you may want to just speak up if we can't figure out how to adjust it.
Yeah, I have my sound all the way up, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But so I've been with Primera for 16 years and bought the company almost 3 years ago. And it was very interesting. I had very good relationships with all of senior management as a team member. And when I took over, those relationships changed a little bit, and it took us a while to kind of work through building the trust in a different way. And I noticed even with his staff, although they trusted me as a team member, it was different when I took over. They wanted more affirmation that I was going to do what I said I was going to do. And, you know, they trusted, but were still questioning. And I think that took probably a year to build that trust in a different way.
Was that surprising to you?
It was a little bit surprising because I had very good relationships with most of the staff, but then that, you know, it was a new relationship. It changed, and it took a while to establish trust in that new relationship.
Yeah, so I love that you had this longstanding relationship with everyone. So one would have thought it would have been like just super easy to move into this new role, and yeah, you actually ended up sort of being tested in a way, not in a not in a terrible way, but people are like, well, we trusted her in this role, but I don't know, is she going to be different now that she's the person in charge? And so it does take time, and it is not something that happens overnight. So I think it's great for all of us to recognize, like, anytime we change those kind of roles within teams, we know that, we can go back to sort of an early stage of development, and we have to reestablish that that trust in people knowing who we are and that we stand for what we stand for and that we do what we say we're going to do. Now, I know you also took on a big cultural change, and that cultural change, you knew when you went into it, was going to create potentially some, havoc with trust a little bit. And so tell us a little bit about what you did and how you did that and what you experienced as a result of making that change.
Absolutely. So our senior management team sat down and, like I said, we were big fans of Patrick Lencioni and really wanted to establish more of a more positive culture within the company. And so we went through and picked character traits that we felt really that we identified with as a senior team and that we wanted to be the core of Primera. And then we changed our performance review process to be character trait based. So instead of, and especially in engineering firms, performance reviews were probably hit or miss. And when they were done, they were very technical. Do you know the codes? Do you understand these calculations? And we totally threw that on its head and said, what we want to know, we can train to the technical, but we want to know is, do you fit the culture of our company? Are you going to be a good team player? Are you accountable? Are you humble? Do you give other people credit? So we started evaluating people on that. And we knew when we started that there were going to be some people that were going to be like, way too touchy-feely for me, I'm out. And there were probably 5 or 10 people that said, yeah, I can't do this. But we've been doing it for 2 years now, and the change in our culture and how people relate to each other and work together has been really amazing. So,
one of the things that you shared that I really, really appreciate is that you said previously that the company operated in a lot of silos. Like within a silo, people did really great work, but they didn't actually trust other people who were outside of sort of their chain, if you will. And shifting this whole way of looking at things and the expectations of the team has really expanded people's ability to work cross-functionally, to work outside of their silos, and to really trust that others are all headed in the same direction and that we have the same vision and we have the same goal, which is a huge, huge shift from a culture standpoint.
Absolutely. We have 4 divisions within the company, and people were historically very protective of their clients. I spent a long time building a relationship with this client. I don't want you coming in doing a project and disappointing them, and then they don't want to work with me anymore. So there wasn't that trust that other people would value that client the same way I value that client. And so part of our culture change and building trust across the company has allowed us to, everybody feels it's one Primera, and everybody feels just as connected to making the company great and doing well for your client as they, because that those people are going to do a good job with my client as well.
That's great. And, when I think about that and I think about what that then creates for the future of your company, it really expands what's possible in terms of what you can do just based on having this much, more welcoming culture, that people are trusting of one another, and that we presume that we're all operating towards the same goal. So that's a really, really big one from my standpoint.
Well,
I would love for us to do the flip side. So we've been talking about trust and how important trust is to teams and organizations and cultures, and a little bit about how each of us relate to trust. What erodes trust? If we look on the flip side of that, what erodes trust? What are the things that could have trust diminish in an organization? Gabriella, I'm going to ask if you would start us off with that one.
Yeah, I think this really builds upon conversations which we already had, because coming back to our Superman concept, if the leader takes over all the time, that undermines trust. So if we want to empower our teams, then we should give them the room and opportunity. And of course, we may steer or we may be clear on what outcome we expect. But at the moment we start to take over each time, then the next time the team will say, yeah, well, listen, but you know, if you want to do it yourself anyway, please go ahead. So I think if you talk about eroding trust as a leader, if you're too control freaky and if you don't give space to the team to find their way and to grow in their roles. Of course, if there's repeatedly an issue, you know, you talk about different conversations and how you could steer, how you could drive performance. But it starts with, you know, on how to empower the team and how to make sure that they have the space. And of course, they may do it slightly different than you would have done yourself. But well, if you could see even the creativity and the fun out of that, then it will only lead to 1 + 1 = 3. So I think that's a good answer to your question. Don't do it all yourself. Give
Yes.
room and space to the teams.
Great. Great. And Sara, I'm going to turn to you next, but I'm going to add a little bit of a nuance to this one, because one of the questions that came from the chat room was, what should employees or staff do when the organization says one thing and then does something else? So they're actually building in mistrust. And you've had a chance to observe a number of organizations. Now, maybe you haven't seen that, but what is your insight about what erodes trust? And if employees are in this position of the company says one thing and does something else, is there anything that you've seen that employees can do to actually shift that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I was going to say that that's one way to erode trust as well. And I think it's something I've definitely seen quite a bit in different organizations that I've worked in. I think it's up to the individual leaders and even managers of different groups to be able to allow for more transparency and helping understand what is happening. When starting it, like in this organization, being able to be a part of understanding some of the nuances and like what people are saying. We're in the middle of evaluating the employee engagement survey, and what people may interpret their perception is reality, when in fact we're trying to showcase another angle. And what we're trying to do is just not reaching or aligning with what people are seeing. So I think transparency is the key in regards to making sure that you're walking the line, right? I don't know the saying, like you talk the walk or you walk the talk. You know what that saying.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important, just being able to have a clear and open dialogue.
Great. Yeah, and I do think that is one of those places that we can see trust erode, where there is that kind of a disconnect. I know often when people are new going to an organization, and one of the questions they may ask is, how do things really get done around here? And sometimes you see there's a disparity between, what leadership says in terms of how things get done and what the real way that things are that get done. And that isn't necessarily a good or a bad. It's just fascinating to know that, culture exists on a lot of different levels, and there's the formal things that we do, and then there's the informal way that culture emerges as well. Erin, any other thoughts you have on how trust is eroded? And so I know you had to pay really, really close attention to that when you made the culture change you made, because it definitely could nick away at the culture that existed. And it was really intentional on your part. So any other thoughts that you have on what might erode trust?
Yeah, I think like Sara and Gabrielle said, the lack of accountability, if people feel like you're not doing what you said you were going to do. But I've also noticed that people are very impatient. If they we're going to do this, they're like, great, next week, right? It's going to be done. And so I think a lot of it is just transparency and communication, letting people know we're working on this. Here's the plan. It's going to be done third quarter, and here's why it's going to take that long to get done, so that they know it didn't just go into a black hole. I think people tend to assume that if they don't do something right away, that it's not happening, and you're not doing what you said you were going to do. So by giving them more information about the process and what's going on kind of behind the scenes helps to make sure that they don't lose faith that you're actually doing something.
Thanks. I love that example, because Sara mentioned it's important as leaders to then be transparent, but I love your example of transparency, meaning things like, here's what we're going to do, but providing more of the context and the background, and really setting expectations and level setting what's going to happen and when it's going to happen, so that you sort of head off any like sidebar conversations about, well, they said this last week and it still hasn't happened a week later. That becomes really important in making sure that people know when they can count on you, what you're accountable for, and when it's going to happen. So those are all great, great insights into how to show up in a way that feels transparent and creates expectations that people can count on and know that they're going to count on from you. And then if it doesn't happen, coming back and resetting and saying, hey, I know a month ago we said X, and here's what we encountered that we weren't expecting, and now it looks like it's going to be another 2 weeks or whatever, so that there isn't this question that people have around what's going on here. All right, well, we're actually coming to the close to the close of our session, so I'm going to ask each of you if you have any final thoughts on the importance of trust, how to build trust, anything around this topic that you would like to impart to our listeners. So, Gabrielle, I'm going to start with you, and just give us sort of your final thoughts on trust.
Thank you for that, Peg. I think we had a very good conversation in which we were very open and transparent, showing also on how trustful we were to each other because we didn't know each other front, right? So if you look to the summary of our conversation, then we talk really about trust in terms of performance, accountability. Do you deliver what you say by connecting, you know, and this is really one of my passions. I have a very strong belief that we can achieve better results by connecting, and that's what we need to do more. And if you look now to my current job in which I travel a lot, I even cannot do it as much as I can, but sometimes you can have this simple means by having a small WhatsApp, you know, by mail. We have a weekly call in which we discuss the results and we try to reach out. We do some fun in the team exercises we do, in which you still could connect, or which you even could still show, oh guys, I'm not available, but if there's an urgent questions, find your ways to reach me using all new technology. And in that way, we're not supermen, we're either not superwomen,
Right.
but we try to give guidance. And I think in the end, that's also leadership. I heard one time a very nice definitions how to serve others in achieving their meaningful goals, you know, and that goes beyond just being a manager. So trust is key for that. So thank you for the invitation. I really love the conversation. And I hope by Tiara we even can do more on stepping up and building more trust.
Excellent. Yes, that's our hope too. Okay, Sara, any final thoughts on your part?
Yeah, you know, something that I still believe in, and I'm glad that we're all aligned, is that trust is important. And something that's on my mind as well is, you know, now that we're in a digital age and technology is readily available, how do we think about trust and being able to build that when we're not face to face, especially with distributed teams? So a little food for thought and something to think about a little bit more.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for having me here.
Delighted. And your questions are really great when it's so timely. You know, as we take full advantage of all the technology, it also keeps us farther apart in terms of our physical presence with one another. So, you know, trust then does become an important element as leaders for us to consider how are we going to build trust across global teams that are not physically present in the same place on a day-to-day basis. So thanks for seeding that. That's a really good one to be thinking about as well. So Erin, what about you? What are your final thoughts on trust? Anything you want to share with our audience? Okay, we're not hearing you, so I need you to. Okay, I'm gonna say a few comments and then we'll come back to you and see if we've got you on sound. I'm so sorry that your sound is being a little goofy today. So I will also add my thanks to everyone for participating on the panel today. I loved all the various ways that you shared your wisdom and your insights, and the examples that you provided were so helpful in terms of taking this concept, this idea of trust, and actually sorting through what do we actually know about how to ensure that we're creating safe environments where people can trust and can cooperate and collaborate together. I also want to give special thanks to Betsy for producing behind the scenes and then having to jump actually right onto the call to help us out when we had a little bit of a technical dilemma. And a few of my final thoughts are, once again, that I really do feel like trust is that glue that kind of binds relationships. And so I think keeping that as a really core understanding of trust and how we work with that. What we know is that when trust is present, we do assume positive intention. Sara mentioned that earlier. We do empower others. That came up quite a bit today. And we do have opportunities within organizations to then act with integrity, both as leaders, acting with integrity. And Erin really illuminated a lot of ways that acting with integrity comes up, but also to really encourage, along with empowerment, that level of integrity among our team and our staffs. So we know that it's foundational to building strong teams, and as leaders, each of you talked about lots of different ways that happens, and we'll all learn from one another on that. And so before we wrap, final wrap, Erin, I'm going to come back to you to see if maybe your sound has figured itself out and we can hear you again. No, unfortunately, I'm so sorry, but we're not going to hear you, but we know that you had something to say. So, maybe we'll capture that and put it in the Facebook live underneath in the stream so that people will know that. I'm so sorry that occurred. We hope that you have enjoyed this initial conversation on trust. One of the things that we have found as an organization as we begin to dive into it is that it's a much more nuanced conversation than you trust or you don't trust, which is, I think, how I came to it in many respects. So I've really been having some interesting revelations for myself around when and how, and with other people's thoughts, how do I actually exhibit trust? How do I foster trust? How do I respond to other people's trust or lack of trust in me? And so all of those are areas that I'm exploring for myself. So if you liked this conversation, we would encourage you to join us for our 3-week teleseries that begins next Wednesday, and it's on trust, and we promise it's going to be thought-provoking because we're finding it thought-provoking for us. So if you'd like to delve more deeply into it and really uncover for yourself what are your beliefs around trust and how are you doing what you're doing to foster and encourage trust, then please do consider joining us. You can go to our website and sign up. And then the other piece is, if you like doing these conversations, we're on Facebook Live every Friday. And if you join our Facebook group, or just like us on Facebook, then you'll get announcements about all of that. And we will be able to be part of your regular dialogue around leadership. So thanks once again for joining us for this roundtable. We really appreciate it. Hope to see you in future programs, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye, everybody.